We may still be in the 2024 offseason, but what challenges do the Buffalo Bills face next offseason? We're taking an early look at that today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of Go Bills and Buffalo's Run, also the co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate you all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and it is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. Well, folks, welcome in. I know that we are still in the 2024 offseason, but I always like to take a look at the key decisions that are coming for the Buffalo Bills in the next offseason. And so that's our topic today. What big decisions does Brandon Beane have waiting for him in the 2025 offseason? What is the cap situation? What draft picks do they have? What expiring contracts? What's the fifth-year option to decide on? Who might get cut? Who might get extended? All of that. And I feel like it just hits better this time of year because it's all very relevant because we just lived through all of this for this past offseason. And so let's work through it because this is stuff that is certainly in mind for Brandon Beane as he navigates all the decisions that he makes right now. It's okay, well, what do I have coming and how does this decision impact those decisions? So let's get into it. Let's start with the cap situation for the Buffalo Bills entering next offseason. According to overthecap.com, the Bills currently have $14 million in cap space, which is quite different than the last several off seasons where the Bills entered the offseason over the cap and had to do a bunch of different cap clearing moves, whether it was cutting players, restructures, whatever, to become cap compliant. The Bills are going to go into next offseason compliant with the cap. And between that and the other opportunities that they'll have to create cap space, I think you'll see the Bills have more opportunities to spend in free agency than they have in the last couple of years. Now, this number does factor in a projected 2025 salary cap of $260 million. This year, it's at $255.4. And so if it's more than $260 million, then the Bills will have more cap space just like the rest of the league. But I think that's a pretty conservative estimate in terms of the jump. That's what over the cap has. And we've seen the cap jump significantly year over year. And if that happens again next year, then the Bills and the rest of the league will have a lot of cap space to work with. So like I mentioned, the Bills currently have $14 million in projected cap space as of right now, entering 2025. Just to give you an idea on some of the other teams, of course, the AFC East and then the Chiefs as well. The Patriots are number one in cap space for 2025 with $128 million. The Jets have $73 million. The Dolphins are they're under the cap by $3 million, but they're closer to zero, obviously. And then the Chiefs have $39 million in cap space. The Bills at 14, and again, I'll get into it more later on in the episode, but there are plenty of opportunities for the Bills to have even more cap space. Also, just in case you're thinking of it, that $14 million does factor in Greg Rousseau's fifth-year option. And that hard number, what is it, $13.4 million, something like that, that is factored into that $14 million. So pretty good when it comes to cap space. Really good when it comes to draft capital. I know I've recently talked about this, but in case you missed it, the Bills are in great shape when it comes to 2025 draft picks. They currently own 10 draft picks. Now, that does include 2 projected compensatory picks, one in the 4th round, one in the 5th round. The 4th round for losing Gabe Davis, the 5th round for losing Leonard Floyd. Both Over the Cap and Lance Zierlein project the Bills to receive those compensatory picks. So this is what they're looking at. They have, of course, their own 1st-round pick, their own 2nd-round pick. They have the Vikings' 2nd-round pick. So go whatever team's playing against the Vikings. We want them to not be very good because you'd love for that to potentially be a top 40 pick. You have a 3rd-round pick. That's your own 4th-round pick. You have the Bears' 4th-round pick. And if they struggle, that could be close to a top 100 pick, maybe top 110, 115 pick. You have a 4th-round compensatory pick, a 5th-round compensatory pick, your own 6th-round pick, and a 6th-round pick from the New York Giants as part of the Boogie Basham trade. So Brandon Beane looking good when it comes to draft capital for the 2025 NFL draft. So between the cap space, between the draft capital, you're looking at potentially a very active offseason for the Buffalo Bills to load up this roster in their final season at Highmark Stadium before they move to the new facility in 2026. So as we continue to discuss the idea of writing the next chapter of the Josh Allen era, you feel like Brandon Beane's in pretty good position to really add to the roster and talent around him. Now, one thing that I wanted to mention as it relates to 2025 draft picks is we've started to see the early 2025 mock drafts, and not that you should put too much stock into them, but they do give you an idea of the talent distribution and where, at least at this point in the process, it's perceived to be rich with talent. And so I've looked at 2 recent 2025 mock drafts, one from Dane Brugler of The Athletic, one from Jordan Reed of ESPN. And these guys are really good draft guys, and I trust them when it comes to having a good idea of what's coming through the pipeline. And so let me share with you the positional distribution of their 1st-round mock drafts, and I think you'll see something pretty interesting. So both guys had 3 quarterbacks going in the 1st round. Both had 0 running backs. Both had 1 tight end. Both had, Jordan had 5 receivers. Dane had 4 receivers. Jordan had 4 offensive linemen. Dane had 6. Jordan had 9 edge rushers. Dane Brugler had 8. They both had 4 defensive tackles. They both had 1 linebacker. They both had 4 corners. And they both had 1 safety. And so while the 2024 NFL draft was all about the offensive players, right? 14 offensive players selected to start the draft before we got a defensive player. This coming draft looks to be really strong when it comes to defense, in particular, the edge rusher position. 9 edge rushers for Jordan Reed, 8 for Dane Brugler. And as you forecast the needs for the Bills, you could see edge rusher being high on that list. And so just a little food for thought. Obviously, there's other strong positions when it comes to this draft. A fair amount of offensive line in both. The Bills will have to figure out Spencer Brown. There's a lot to get into, which we're going to in the coming segments. But the bottom line is the Bills are loaded with draft capital. And in Bills terms, they're in pretty good shape when it comes to the cap, because finally we're entering an offseason where the Bills aren't having to become cap compliant. They are actually in the good when it comes to available cap space. So that should set the foundation for what's to come. In the next segment, I'm going to get into the expiring contracts on both sides of the football. So be sure to stick with me. All right, game off. We got to pause here for just a moment to talk more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying, flag on the play. You've already talked about that, but there's just so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. And the more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's just so much to get, including unique stickers that you can trade with friends to complete albums for bigger prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults, Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. There's always something new and fun to discover in Monopoly Go, so get off the bench and go download it now for free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. All right, folks, let's get into the expiring contracts that the Bills have to make decisions on, both offensively and defensively. And I'll go ahead and spoil it. This is a good situation. The Bills are not staring at a daunting list of expiring contracts, really just 2 starters, and that's it. So at quarterback, Shane Buechele, your only expiring contract, and he's a restricted free agent, so if you want him back, you should be able to get that done. At running back, Ty Johnson, your only expiring contract. Of course, you have James Cook and Ray Davis, your draft pick this year, in the mix for multiple seasons beyond this one. At wide receiver, I guess the big name here would be Mac Hollins, your 4th receiver, in addition to all those other guys, KJ Hamler, Quintez Cephas, Andy Isabella, Chase Claypool. That whole mix is expiring contracts, but not a whole lot of big-ticket guys there. At tight end, Quentin Morris will be a restricted free agent, so in all likelihood, he'll be back. When it comes to the offensive line, the big name here is Spencer Brown. Then otherwise, it's Lyle Collins, Will Clapp, and Tommy Doyle. I don't think you're very concerned there. And then Ryan Vandemark and Alec Anderson are exclusive rights free agents, so they will 100% be back. But the big name on offense is really just Spencer Brown. And we've talked a little bit about this, as some people have questioned whether or not the Bills should go ahead and do that extension now, or if it's best to wait. I can understand both sides of that argument. If you do it now, of course, you loved what you saw in year 3 out of Spencer Brown after 2 seasons of kind of figuring it out. Obviously, a very toolsy player that has had some injuries, and he had a very strange football journey to get to this point, very raw, but you love how he came together in 2023, which is his 3rd season. And so you start to think to yourself, well, if he stacks another big season on top of it, the price only goes up. So there's the benefit in doing it now. But you also would love to have another season of data to allow yourself to make the most informed decision, obviously being mindful of, it's probably going to be more expensive if he does have another great season. So there's some challenging layers to sort through. Obviously, the Bills extended Ed Oliver early, and they were right about that. Maybe they'll do it with Spencer Brown. I think maybe the layer to the Spencer Brown conversation that makes it a little bit challenging has been his injury history. He's had some back problems. He had a surgery this offseason that we don't know exactly what it was for, but it feels like there's always been something. The elbow has been a problem. So you have to really understand what you're signing up for if you do ink him to a long-term extension, which will be pretty healthy. Like I've already said in the podcast, I think he's already played himself into that contract that Austin Jackson got with the Miami Dolphins, which I think was 3 years. Was it 13, 14, 15 million, something like that per season? So I think that's where he's at right now. If he stacks another good season on top of last year, then that price only goes up. So there's positives and negatives to extending him now versus later. And I would fully understand both sides of it. Like if he's your guy, if you look at him and think, yeah, that's our right tackle for now and in the future, and you believe in him, well, then I think it makes sense to go get the deal done now. If you want to have another year of data, including how he gets through it in terms of health, which would make perfect sense to me, then you wait. So that's offense, right? I mean, it's Spencer Brown and a bunch of backups. On the defensive side of the football, it's Rasul Douglas and a bunch of backups. At defensive end, Dwan Smoot, Casey Toohill, Kingsley Jonathan, and Kingsley Jonathan's a restricted free agent. Defensive tackle, Austin Johnson and Deshaun Williams, who you think are a couple of reserves, of course, behind Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones. And now you have Dwayne Carter as a draft pick who's going to be locked up for the next 4 seasons. At linebacker, it's just the two veteran additions, Nicholas Morrow and Dion Jones. At corner, of course, Rasul Douglas, Kyron Brown, who will be a restricted free agent. At safety, Mike Edwards and Damar Hamlin. We'll see about Mike Edwards. That's an interesting conversation. If he winds up being a good starter for this team, which I think is possible, then that becomes an interesting conversation, of course, because Taylor Rapp, you signed to a 3-year deal that you can get out of after one season. We'll talk about that on the other side of it. But also, you've, of course, invested a premium draft pick in Cole Bishop to be a starter for you. So how does Mike Edwards factor in? How does he perform? And does he perform at a level where you say, you know what, we like to keep that guy around? I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. And then when it comes to specialists, Sam Martin and Tyler Bass are both signed beyond 2025, but Reid Ferguson is an expiring contract, and I'd anticipate the Bills getting that taken care of. So just like offense with Spencer Brown and a bunch of backups, on defense, it's Rasul Douglas and a bunch of backups. Now, you could definitely see this being Rasul Douglas's last year in Buffalo. He's been a really good player in the NFL, but he has athletic limitations and he's an aging corner. So I'm not sure that you'd really love the idea of signing him to an extension. I think you just enjoy what you get out of him this year. And I think if the Bills wanted to sign him to an extension, they would have done it this offseason because they had a lot of flexibility with that deal. And that's not how they approached it. They didn't add an additional year to the deal. They restructured it in a different way. And so that's a pretty good sign to me that they're going to let Rasul Douglas play out this year and then become a free agent after the season, which is good news for Kaiir Elam, who's the Bills' third cornerback, right? I think Douglas and Benford are the obvious start. But Kaiir Elam just turned 23 on May 5th. Like, he just turned 23 years old. He is so young. And that's why I continue to say that I don't feel like the book is written on Kaiir Elam. He could very well be a starter in 2025. And obviously right now, based on the moves that the Bills haven't made at outside corner, there's a level of confidence in him because he's pretty much without competition going to be the CB3. Just like Jamarcus Ingram, without competition right now, is pretty much going to be the CB4. So that says to me that there's at least some level of confidence in those players to fill those depth roles. So whether it's Benford and Elam or they wind up investing in a corner elsewhere, I do feel like this is Rasul Douglas's last season. Now, one other talking point here as it relates to this cornerback situation is that I think we can fully put to bed any conversations about Christian Benford moving to safety. I feel like for the last couple of years, it's all been which corner is going to go play safety and take over for Poyer and Hyde. Well, they signed Taylor Rapp to a 3-year deal, and they drafted Cole Bishop in the second round. I think they fully plan on keeping Christian Benford at corner, which to me is exactly the right thing to do. He's very clearly, to me, the best young corner on the team. I am really excited about Christian Benford in year 3 and what he's shown to this point and how he fits this defense and his ball skills, his physicality, his coverage instincts. I'm big on Christian Benford. And so I think we can forget that conversation and just enjoy Christian Benford as a really solid starting cornerback for this team. All right, on the other side of it, we got to talk about the 5th-year option decision, extension candidates, cut candidates, restructure candidates. A lot to get to, so be sure to stick with me. It's winner take all time in the NBA and the NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, let's get into the 5th-year option, extension candidates, cut candidates, and restructure candidates. When it comes to the 5th-year option, the player the Bills have to decide on is Kaiir Elam. And obviously right now that doesn't look like it's anywhere close to something they're going to want to say yes to. As things currently stand, unless Kaiir Elam makes the Pro Bowl in 2024, he stands to get $13 million on the fifth-year option. And so where that money will ultimately land is the average of the 3rd to 25th highest salaries at corner over the past 5 seasons. So that's what he'll get if the Bills choose to pick up the fifth-year option. I don't think they're going to. Unless he winds up starting, everything comes together, he's awesome. Like, that's what would have to happen for Kaiir Elam to get the fifth-year option picked up. I think more likely than not, he's the CB3 this year. And barring an injury from Douglas or Benford, he's a reserve player. So right now that feels like an easy no, which will be the first time in a while the Bills said no to a fifth-year option. I don't think they've said no to any of them to this point under this regime. They picked up Allen, Edmonds, Tre'Davious White, Oliver, Rousseau. Yeah, I think this would be the first one. So we'll see how that all comes together. It's not the kiss of death. If you don't get your fifth-year option picked up, you can certainly let them play it out. And then if you want to extend them, extend them. You saw that happen with Austin Jackson. When it comes to extension candidates, and these are players that are not expiring contracts. So we talked about all the expiring contracts. Of course, they are all extension candidates. But sometimes you want to get ahead of a contract, a guy that'll be, in this case, scheduled to be an expired contract after 2026. So you'd want to do it a year early, kind of like the Bills have done with other players. You saw it with Josh Allen, Tre'Davious White, Dawson Knox, Tyler Bass. Now, this stuff happens from time to time. Of course, we just saw it with Dion Dawkins and Taron Johnson. The Bills have done it with Micah Hyde. This is a very normal practice for the Bills. So there's going to be some young players that are finished with their 3rd season of the rookie deal. And in case you were unaware, you are not eligible to get a contract extension until you have played 3 seasons in the NFL. And so after 2024, James Cook, Khalil Shakir, Terrel Bernard, and Christian Benford will have finished 3 seasons of their rookie deal. They are extension eligible. You don't have to do it. They're under contract for a 4th season. And, of course, we saw that happen with Gabe Davis. Gabe Davis just played out his rookie deal, and he walked in free agency. We saw it happen with A.J. Epinesa, played out his free agent deal, re-signed with the Bills. And then, of course, you've seen examples of the Bills extending a player, Dawson Knox, Tyler Bass, after the 3rd season. James Cook, Khalil Shakir, Terrel Bernard, Christian Benford is where that conversation will go when it comes to guys on rookie deals. It'll be fascinating, right? Because the whole paying a running back conversation is going to be a big one as it relates to James Cook. Terrel Bernard and, him being a cornerstone of this roster in the making. Of course, he balls out this year. You probably want to get that done. Same thing with Christian Benford. And then Khalil Shakir's value and how does his role evolve in this offense with, a lot going to Dalton Kincaid, with a first-round investment in Keon Coleman, with a free agent addition in Curtis Samuel. I mean, Khalil Shakir led this team in receiving the last 12 games of last year. What does it look like moving forward? I'm fascinated to find out. So, again, you don't have to do those guys, but you could. And it's very much the Spencer Brown conversation that we've already had. Do it now. It's probably cheaper. Or do you want more data? Then there's 2 veteran players that I think are very logical extension candidates that are not expiring contracts but will be. Connor McGovern, 2025 is the last year of his contract. And right now in 2025, that's scheduled to be a $9.4 million cap hit. You know the deal. Extend them. You bring that money down, push it out into future years. You get cap space now. We've seen this happen repeatedly, right? It just happened with Taron Johnson and Dion Dawkins this offseason. You could do that with Connor McGovern if you'd like the answer that he provides for you at center, or you want to move him back to guard. You feel like he's going to be a pillar of your offensive line. 2026 will be his age 29 season, so maybe you think he can play at a high level until he's 31, 32, something like that, 33. You can invest some money there, free up some cap space, and lock in a starter. The other one is Greg Rousseau. Of course, the Bills picked up his fifth-year option, so he'll be playing in 2025 for a hard cap number of $13.4 million. But this is absolutely an Ed Oliver situation. Ed Oliver was scheduled to go into last season and play on his fifth-year option. The Bills extended him, and it looks like a great decision. You can probably do the same thing with Greg Rousseau. Or it can become very obvious if Greg Rousseau has a breakout season, you'll want to get that done immediately. And again, you would reduce that 13.4, extend the player, get more cap space now, and of course, lock yourself into a player that you like. When it comes to cut candidates, there's several. I think the leading guy here is Von Miller. The Bills can cut Von Miller after the season and free up $8.5 million in cap space. Now, you would carry a dead cap accumulation of $15 million, but you probably might be okay with that to get the $8.5 million in savings. You can cut Taylor Rapp. That'll get you $2.5 million for 1.3 in dead cap. You can cut David Edwards. That would get you $2.8 million with $875,000 in dead cap. You can cut Sam Martin. That'll save you $1.4 million with $400,000 in dead cap. You can cut Mitch Trubisky. That'll get you $2.5 million for $750K in dead cap. And then Cam Lewis as $1.4 million in savings for $200,000 in dead cap. I think those are the most logical players that you look at and see some level of cap savings and some level of maybe they'd want to cut them. And then when it comes to restructure candidates, there's always an abundance of these. I'll work through the list here. Josh Allen. Now, the Bills kind of already did the restructure for next year, but if they wanted to do more with the deal, they could free up $10 more million. Matt Milano, they could restructure for $5.5 million. Dion Dawkins, they could free up $9.8 million. That one feels logical to me. Ed Oliver, they can do and free up $8.7. Taron Johnson, they can restructure and free up $3.3. So I think those are the ones that seem the most obvious to me. Dion Dawkins for $9.8, Ed Oliver for $8.7, and Taron Johnson for $3.3. That's around $20 million. So you do that, plus the 14 that you're already starting with. All right, now you got $35 million, $34 million in cap space before you've done anything else. Looking pretty good. Also, Dawson Knox, you can restructure for $5.9, Daquan Jones for $4.3, Connor McGovern for $3.9, Curtis Samuel for $3.9, and AJ Epinesa for $2.2. So a lot of room for Brandon Beane to create cap space. So the bottom line here is we're going to have a lot different conversations next year. It's not going to be tight. The Bills aren't going to have to make a million moves to become cap compliant. They're flexible. They have cap space. They have cap draft picks. There are plenty of logical extension candidates. There's logical cut candidates, restructure candidates. Not an overwhelming list at all of expiring contracts, right? Spencer Brown and some backups. Rasul Douglas and some backups when it comes to offense and defense. So part of the emphasis that I've had for the approach that Brandon Beane should have this offseason, which was you got to get younger and cheaper. You have to reset some areas of this roster. And then he went out and did that. Part of that is knowing your opportunities to build more next offseason. I think the Bills are still a contending team. I have high expectations for the Bills in 2024. You don't ever have a throwaway season, not with a quarterback like Josh Allen. But you should get even more excited about how they can keep building and position themselves for big runs in 25, 26, 27, and beyond. Of course, aligning very closely with the opening of the new stadium. All right, folks, this has been fun. I hope you enjoyed kind of getting an early look at everything that's on Brandon Beane's plate next offseason, and certainly helps me at least calibrate my mindset for the decisions that are coming right now and how future years impact them. All right, that's going to do it for us here today on the podcast. As always, I kindly ask that you share, subscribe, rate, and review. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills, and I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.